Hello, this is Shannon Elizabeth Eastman. I am your host for the Work That Matters podcast. These are conversations that take place at the intersection of personal and business growth. I am coming to you today from Dublin, Ireland. My office is just over in D6, Rathmines. And today I'm joined by Keith Blakemore-Noble from the UK. He is having a conversation with me today about the visibility paradox and what is it about being seen that has us in hiding. So Keith is actually a fear strategist. So he coaches, consults, advises in the area of fear in a range of sectors. He opened this up in the last 10 years after more than 20 years in a technology, IT-driven career and environment. So Keith is a published author. He speaks on the topic. He's also a hypnotist, magician, and a lot of fun to talk to. I had a really great conversation with him. We covered mindset, the unconscious self, roots from our younger years that drive behavior and patterns today, and some very pragmatic and practical insights as to why we experience fear, how to reframe it, and more in-depth insight. I think insight is the word I want. More insight on why it shows up and how dancing with it can serve us a lot more so than stepping away from it. It's my intention today that not only do you enjoy this conversation, but that it shifts your perspective somewhat on what is possible for you. I am delighted to have Keith here today for another conversation at the intersection of personal and business growth. And the topic today is quite curious. Actually, Keith, when you mentioned the comment to me, I'm just going back to that a couple of weeks ago, I think my response was to swoon and hit the floor, because it's a topic that's of great interest to me as well. The unconscious, do you remember that? Do you remember my response to swooning and hitting the floor? The intersection of...
I do.
And the unconscious mind.
Oh, yes.
And particularly the visibility paradox. Such a great name. Such a great name. You have brought a quote into the conversation today to encapsulate what we're discussing. I love it. And I love where you got it from, and I love how you combined it. What is the quote?
The quote is about the visibility paradox, and the quote is, "The only thing in the world worse than being seen is not being seen."
Wow. That lands. That definitely lands.
It does, doesn't it?
I think in the area that I operate most in, which is business owners and entrepreneurs, being seen is definitely a paradox, and it's also deeply palpable. I think many times I've heard, I want to say 1,000, but that feels hyperbolic. Many times I've heard people say, I know what I'm supposed to do, but yet I just can't do it. So this paradox is playing out, I think, in all of us. Maybe it's a human trait. Tell me about the quote. What does it mean for you?
What it means for me, to me, it's, I was going to say self-explanatory. I don't mean that in any sort of, you should get it self-explanatory, it's obvious sort of way. But it's to me, it speaks clearly. I think is what I'm looking to say there. Is it clear that as you say, so often we know what we need to do, but we just can't bring ourselves to do it. And so often, especially in business, we know we need to be visible. We need our brand to be visible. We need our company to be visible. We need us to be visible. We need to be out there to be doing all of these things. And yet, for so many of us, that can be really, really scary, very uncomfortable.
Yes.
And for many, it can feel like being the worst thing in the world is to be seen, to be standing up for what you believe, to be attracting attention.
Yeah.
Can seem like the worst thing. Whereas in fact, even worse than that is not standing up, because when we become invisible, nobody's going to find us. Nobody's going to be able to work with us. We're not going to be able to serve people by being invisible.
I think that's where the conflict comes from. Like, you have this heart song, and I'm playing off that analogy of don't die with the music in you. And we have this heart song that we feel compelled to pursue or follow or let out, if you go with that analogy still. And we're scared of being seen, and we're frustrated and in conflict with staying hidden. Oh,
Yeah.
so we've got this like inertia that plays out, or something else that I see. So if it's not inertia, or maybe there is moments of inertia where you just sit and go and distract ourselves with maybe a whiskey or what have you.
Yeah.
It does come a point when you feel like, okay, I have to do something. And then you start calling a personal brand expert, only to get to the point in that project where the personal brand expert is like, okay, let's get you doing a live webinar. Let's get your website showing up. Let's get you on YouTube. And then immediately it shuts down again and pause goes on and they retreat.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's
I can identify. I've been there in the earlier days with that as well. As you were describing it, I was thinking, oh yeah, I remember doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it all boils down to this visibility paradox. We know we should be visible, and in some ways we want to be visible because of what it will enable us to achieve, and the ways it will enable us to ultimately serve our fellow humans. And we also want to be invisible because by being visible, yes, we attract attention from people, but we also attract attention from people.
Yeah.
And that can be such a huge problem when you've got two parts of you fighting in two different directions. You can't go in two different directions at the same time. One of you wants to go for visibility, one wants to be invisible. You can't achieve both. And you get that massive tension and the conflict, which is why so often we fail to achieve the things we want to achieve. And we will often procrastinate, but not feel like we're procrastinating. And that example you gave with seeking out a branding consultant or a branding specialist, it's a perfect example of it. Now, I'm not saying don't seek out branding consultants. They are very, very useful and absolutely a part of the process. But for many people, they can use that as a form of procrastination. So, oh, right, yes, I need to be visible. So I'm not going to be visible now because I haven't got a brand. I'll work with a branding consultant. We tell ourselves we're doing that. Once I have the branding, I will then become visible. When in fact, all we're doing is, I'll work with a branding consultant. This gives me a good excuse not to put anything out there because I'm not branded. Whereas if we just put stuff out there, the branding can come later on. And in fact, by actually putting stuff out there even before we have any branding, that in itself helps to refine and inform our brand so that when we're speaking with our branding consultant, we've got far more background and real world interaction with people to bring into the conversation, which means the brand itself becomes much more refined because it's based on what actually happens rather than what we think we might want to happen.
It's like the concept that I'm deeply in love with. Iterate, iterate, iterate. Good enough is good enough. And it requires, at least one thing that it requires is a detachment from being perfect. I like to describe it as being perfectly imperfect, but it's a very real thing for many people is that they have to look a particular way and they have to show up in a particular way. So I just want to share and be very transparent that I'm launching this podcast 19th of June. And whilst I'm quite visible in text and social media content and marketing content, I am not visible audibly or on a video platform, nor am I visible one-to-one in this particular form that I'm doing with you right now. And I had 2 days of a wobble. Actually, I've had 2 bouts of wobble. So the first one was when I initially announced that I was doing a podcast. I remember that announcement went out and I immediately went, what have I just done? So that was a very interesting space for me. And then the second thing was, the second time was a couple days ago. I've now done a number of these podcasts, and in the last few days, I'm going to go with 2 or 3 days, I was thinking, I am deeply uncomfortable, like deeply uncomfortable. And I sat with it, and I messaged a good friend of mine, and I was just being really honest with him, going, here I am talking about, being seen and showing up and being in service, and I am not okay. And I really loved his feedback. He said, and I explained to him, I don't necessarily have all my ideas articulated in a way that will land the first time. And so there's probably going to be some criticism and pushback. I'm also not mad about hearing my own voice. So all that was playing out, and I was like, and I'm not, I've got COVID-19 here, and I'm not in a studio in my office. I'm in my gaff, and I'm not really happy about being on video when it's not all polished and perfect in a studio. And I said, I'm actually nervous about being misjudged. I'm nervous about having all the opinions of other people. And Kim's response to me was to the effect of, you will have as many people challenge you and oppose you as you will support and embrace you. And it is in accepting those two equally that I get to stand in this place of following what is my heart song. But I experienced it. I actually have a little bit of adrenaline going through my body talking about it openly. And yet I want to, because that's what this platform is for, is to acknowledge that it is a human trait. You're definitely not alone. Keith, have you had any moments of that recently? I know you mentioned it as you were coming in to your business after your IT career. We're definitely going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But what's the fear element like in your life today?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when I tell people that I'm the fear strategist. I help people transform their fears into strengths. People say, "Oh, you must have no fear then." And there was a point where I used to sort of think, well, I can't have any fears, because how can I be the fear strategist helping other people conquer their fears if I have any fears? That will make me a fraud. Until it's kind of hit me. It's like, stop being stupid, Keith. Everybody has fears. Yes, you have fears. The reason you're the fear strategist is that you know how to develop the strategies to conquer those fears. I mean, it would be like saying, oh, you can't be a doctor because you got a cold.
Oh, good point.
We all have these things. Or it'd be like saying you can't be a car mechanic because your car broke down once. Yeah, it broke down, and the mechanic knew how to fix it. The mechanic knew what to do to get it going again. So yes, I mean, I resonate strongly with what you were saying there. I'm in a networking organization, and one of the things that they do is it's online at the moment, because obviously we've got the whole COVID thing, which is so it's great that it's online. You get to go from meeting to meeting all around the country. One of the things they do is they have a section where somebody comes in and does a 20-minute talk on whatever topic. And so I'm going to go for that. Yeah. Why not? So I do that, and I've now got 3 different talks which I take around, because I'm going around as many of them as I possibly can. But every time when I've got a new talk and I'm going to deliver it, every time for the first 5 or 6 meetings, I always get these feelings of nervousness before it, and it fades as you go through them until you really settle in. It's like, yeah, we've got this. But the first time I do one, there is that part of me that goes, you know what? If they message me now and say, sorry, the meeting's cancelled, my initial reaction is going to be, oh, yes.
I'm going to be okay with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, of course, the difference between me now and perhaps the me 10 years ago is that the me 10 years ago would have been finding excuses to get out of the meeting, whereas the me now is going, right, okay, that's interesting. We've got that feeling. We've got that fear. I acknowledge it. It's perfectly natural. And here's how I'm going to address it. Well,
that is a really great bridge. I've just seen this bridge metaphor in the language you just used. So the you, can I go with 10 years ago?
Yes. Yeah.
Excuses to cancel and not show up, or delegate it or offer it to someone else. And then the you today is engaging strategies to work with the fear to be more present and show up in those opportunities.
Absolutely.
So there's this interesting I don't know if I call it a comfort zone, because now I'm putting my labels on it, but you're in this comfort zone 10 years ago, and that particular opportunity was not comfortable. So you wanted to like retreat, but you found a way to leave that comfort zone, play in this, I'm not going to call it the abyss, but it's definitely not a comfortable place in the beginning. So that you could come over here and be like, I've got a bunch of strategies, or at least a strategy that I can engage, because those moments will always show up. And now it's about managing fear as opposed to being overcome by it.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
So how do we go from
great.
here to here?
That is a wonderful question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the sort of thing that I work with clients to really help them address those. I wish there was a single formula. If you're right, what you do is you do this, then this, then this, then this, and you're done. And I know there are people who kind of operate it in that way. Oh, here's the exact blueprint to achieve the exact results I got. You see that with business mentors.
Everywhere.
They say,
everywhere.
Gurus, yeah. They're saying, I'll give you the exact steps I took to achieve the results I got, with the implication that if you follow these, you'll get the same results I got. You won't, for multiple reasons. One, you are not the same as the person who got those results. You're coming from a different situation. You act in a different way. You operate differently, so you will get different results. And secondly, even if that business expert were to start afresh right now, they wouldn't be using those techniques and strategies. They would be using different ones, because it's a different situation that we're in. So there is no one-size-fits-all blueprint for anything.
So the context then to consider, the context to bring in to say, here's the foundation with which that work gets to show up, would be things like, am I born this way? What is the relationship between my unconscious self and my conscious self? What is the mindset? Those are things that we'd want to understand a bit more to establish a foundation with which to engage strategies. Yes?
Absolutely, yes. Once you establish the foundations, then you can start to analyze this specific situation, and from that, tailor the strategies to fit that particular individual.
Well, let's start with mindset. What is mindset?
Great question. So mindset it's our the collection of everything that's going on in our mind that puts us in a particular position. Let me try and explain that a slightly different way. I'll start with an example. Have you ever had the situation where, for example, you've bought a new car, or you've bought a car, and all of a sudden you notice lots of that make, model, and color are now on the road? Lots of other cars exactly the same as the one you've got.
I noticed that with words. I learn a new word, and then in the next
yes.
year, 5 times.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Now, does that mean that when you learn that new word, suddenly the whole of the rest of the world you learned that new word and all started using it?
No.
Probably not. Probably not.
Although my first answer, no. Carry on.
That's all right. Unless it's a brand new word that the whole world has only heard for the first time. But usually when we hear a word, we start to see it everywhere simply because we're now aware of that word. That word has a relevance to us. And we start to see it. Whereas previously that word had no relevance to us, so we never even noticed it. What's going on there? That's part of mindset. Because we are constantly bombarded by information through our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, our feelings, all our senses being bombarded with, it said, 2 million bits of information every second. That's a lot of information coming in. Our conscious mind, which is, take a slight detour here. We've got conscious and unconscious part of our mind. That it doesn't mean we've got two physically separate minds. There's the conscious here and the unconscious here. This is all kind of, it's metaphor to explain our understanding of how it all seems to work. But we've got part of our mind which is unconscious. And that is a part of our mind which its primary function is to keep us alive, keep us safe. And that's the bit that does all the things we do without thinking. So you just took a sip of water from your glass there. You didn't have to think, oh, I'm feeling thirsty. What do I need to do? Oh, I need to drink some water. Okay, where can I find some water? Oh, there's some water in the glass. Right. How do I pick that glass up? Which muscles do I move? You didn't have to think of any of that. It's just part of your mind went, oh, we're a bit thirsty. So you reached for the glass, took a sip of water. You probably didn't even realize you were doing it because it's all unconscious. Or when we're walking, we're not working out how to walk every time we do it.
Yeah.
All these things are handled by our unconscious. Our breathing, everything. It's all handled by our unconscious. Then we've got the conscious mind. And that you can kind of think of as our awareness. It's the bit that we're aware of thinking with.
Yep, understood.
That's kind of our conscious mind.
Yeah.
Now, the conscious mind can think great thoughts. It can think all manner of abstract wonders. And it can also focus into intense detail. Very versatile. But it can only handle 7 chunks of information at any one time. So we've got 2 million bits coming in.
Yeah.
Our conscious can only handle about 7 chunks, which is about 130 bits of information. Because a chunk, I mean, it varies. If you are trying to memorize somebody's telephone number and they just give you a stream of 12 digits, like, what? It's gone. Because that's 12 chunks.
Yeah.
If you can break that into sections, which is why telephone numbers are always broken into sections. You've got the area code, then you've got maybe a block of 3 and a block of 4. That now becomes 3 chunks, and it's easier to memorize those 3 chunks than it is to memorize 12 individual digits. So our conscious can handle 7 chunks of information at any one time. And it's always going to vary what information it is handling, because if you then change and look at something else, the bits you were thinking about before are no longer needed and then moved out. So that our unconscious can know which information to give to our conscious mind at any given time, we have a whole set of, you can think of them as filters that filter out all this information so that our unconscious can go, no, that's no good. No, that's good. Oh, that's good stuff. We'll pass that up to conscious. Conscious will probably want to know about this.
Right.
So it is when you're reading and then you suddenly spot that word, unconscious goes, oh, that word's important to us because we just memorized. Right, I'll just pass it up to conscious. They can deal with it.
Yeah.
And these filters are where our mindset comes from. And it's things like our beliefs, things that we hold to be true.
So therefore fear comes.
Fear all comes in with it. Absolutely. And we'll look at what that is in just a sec. So these filters, we got our beliefs, which are things we hold to be true. We got values, things which are important to us. We've got the type of language we use. You mentioned when you see a new word, you start to see it elsewhere. That all fits in with language. For example, Warren Buffett, very famous investor, can tell lots of information about a company just by reading the company accounts or the summary sheet of the company accounts. He can tell all sorts of things and can work out how to like to do in the future because he has the appropriate language. If you or I looked at those accounts, we'd probably go, that's nice.
No idea.
Exactly. On the other hand, there are many topics which you have got great in-depth knowledge of, which if Warren Buffett were to discuss them with you, he would be going, Shannon, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't understand. So language can have a huge impact on our mindset. We've got attitudes. We've got things called meta programs, which are kind of like different switches and so on. Things like introvert, extrovert. How do you learn? Yeah. Do you prefer to learn by seeing, by doing, by hearing? All of these sorts of things, and they all collect together to form our mindset. And fear is definitely built from that mindset. Excuse me. Part of it is our beliefs. Part of it is our experiences. If you have been told over and over and over again by someone in authority when you're very young that something is dangerous and is scary, you will accept and believe it is scary. So you have the belief that thing is scary. Which means you start to have the fear.
I just had this experience in the last week and a half.
Yeah.
So there's a TV ad that I haven't seen, but my mum has seen it. And the TV advertisement is something to the effect of, if you look at your mobile phone for even a second, chances are you're going to get into a car crash. And my mother has seen this advertisement on TV a good few times. So fast forward, in the last week and a half, I got a call to run some errands for her and her sister, my aunt, which of course I did. So I picked up my mom, got in the car, set the GPS, and off we went. Now, this is during COVID-19 time, so the motorway is empty. It is our vehicle and no other vehicle on the motorway. And my mom is in the passenger seat. And at one point, there's a spaghetti roundabout or a spaghetti set of roundabouts, all empty, no cars on them, in this particular area of Dublin. And I picked up the GPS on my phone to just check where I needed to go. And my mother's visceral reaction in the car, which was a shriek and a holding her hands out on the dashboard and leaning her head back into the seat and screaming, "Oh my God, it just takes 1 second to get us into a car crash." Well, first of all, that scared the living daylights out of me. Second, there's no cars on the motorway. I'm looking at a GPS map on my phone. I'm not texting a friend. But my mom has been programmed by this TV advertisement to believe that any glancing of a mobile phone is going to cause your car to crash. So the conversation, I'm not going to describe it because it was a bit intense. I think I ended up pulling over and asked her to get out of the car because she just terrified me, and it was difficult to drive when you have a passenger like that. But it was this idea that she wasn't aware, and I'm reflecting on it now because clearly we were on an open motorway with 3 lanes going in both directions that had no other car on it. So the chances of us being in danger were probably smaller than if there were cars on it. The roundabout was about, 100 meters ahead of us. So there was clear distance, but none of that played into her narrative in that moment. Mm-hmm. What played into it was this advertisement on TV that she's watched so many times that just made her go, "Stop!" And I'm looking at that now going, this is clearly a message that she's been told over and over and over. There's no logic and reason that can show up in that narrative. And she's she's reacting from this unconscious fear that has no merit. I'm also an amazing driver. And did I mention the motorways was completely empty? A message that you hear over and over and over gets rooted into what is our unconscious self.
Exactly.
And it triggers, in this case, me looking at a GPS map on my phone to check a roundabout. And she physically flushed in the face and physical reaction in the car within a split second of me picking up the phone.
Yeah. So here's something for you to think about. Imagine when you're growing up, you're told, "Shut up, keep quiet, nobody wants to hear what you've got to say." Because perhaps you're interrupting. The adults are having a conversation. It's like, "Oh, just shut up. We're trying to talk here. No one wants to hear what you've got to say. Go away." You hear that time and time and time again as you're growing up. Okay?
Yeah.
Now you're a grown up. Yay! Yay for being grown ups. And you've got your business and you need to get out there and you need to tell people about what you've got. You're proud of this thing and you need to tell people about it. And that little voice in the back of your mind's going, "No, shut up. Nobody wants to hear what you've got to say. Nobody wants to see what you've made. Nobody's interested." How likely are you going to be to stand up and say, "Hey, I've got this"?
Of course. The moment you reach for the mobile phone to check your map on the GPS, you trigger this visceral reaction that has got no logic, no merit, but you can't help yourself. My mom could not help her terror, thinking absolutely that I was about to crash our car. So, Keith, in the business world, I can see clearly that those younger experiences would have a very important role to play in how we show up, particularly from ages 0 to 6. I think it's helpful for the audience to hear that, your mind in those development stages, 0 to 6 years old, your mind anyway is like in a state of hypnosis. So everything that goes in, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. So from the age of 0 to about 6 or 7, our mind is like a sponge. It will absorb everything uncritically. It will accept everything that we're said.
Everything.
From about the age of 7, we develop this kind of filter which goes, is that true? Do we believe that? If it does, if we do believe it, then we accept it. If we don't believe it, then it just bounces off.
And we accept it and store it and keep it for 40 years.
Yeah, which is why.
Yeah,
which is why, for example, you can tell a 3-year-old about this jolly fat man in a red suit with a white beard who comes down the chimney once a year and gives presents to all the good little boys and girls. Tell a 3-year-old that, they're in wonder. Wow, is he going to come? Oh, I've got to be good. Is he going to come and see me? Oh, if you tell that to a 30-year-old, they're going to kind of think you've been on the sauce because the young one hasn't got that filter that checks, does this fit? Basically, does this fit our mindset? Does this align with our mindset?
So the childhood experience, I would go 0 to 6, when our minds are like in a hypnotic state, we're just accepting everything without
absorbing
the filter.
everything, yeah.
Moving throughout our young adult life and then our adult life, particularly in a business environment, there are likely to be moments in that business journey where you experience failure, sometimes publicly, where you mess up publicly, where a business can go under and the leaders or the CEO of that firm could have it made about them personally. So these are all very, I would say, acute traumatic experiences to varying degrees. We have to put it on a spectrum. Yeah. That also kind of lodge themselves into our unconscious mind, so that 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, when you're ready to show up again, it triggers that moment 7 years ago when the business went under and you were the talk of the town for failing at that business. And you're like, oh my God. And that's a palpable fear. Never mind using a mobile phone to check a GPS map. I'd imagine that trigger is deeply visceral.
Here's the interesting thing for you. You mentioned that when we set up those experiences we had a few years ago. Here's the thing. It's actually triggering the experiences we had when we were 0 to 6 years old. Is where most of that comes from.
Yes.
And there's a reason. There's that whole cliche about, tell me about your childhood, because so much of this comes from when we're really, really young. So let's take the example of two individuals, both set up businesses, both create something good, they get lots of publicity, and then both businesses spectacularly collapse.
Yep.
Both business leaders get ridiculed for it. They get people saying, "Oh, you were rubbish. Oh, you should have seen this coming." All the sort of
never
public
mind the internal. Never mind the internal.
Well, that's what we're going to come on to, because that's the very important thing. So they both got all this same external stuff coming to them.
Yeah.
7 years later, 7, 10, 5, whatever it is, years later, both decide they're going to set up a new company. One of them gets held back by all of this stuff that happened. The other one doesn't and goes ahead and makes a big success. What's going on? Because they both got the same situation.
What is going on?
It's all back to earlier childhood. One of those people, for example, they make a mistake, or they do something, they say something wrong, they say something silly, whatever. They get laughed at, they get ridiculed by their peers, by their parents. They get ridiculed, laughed at. I see, you're stupid. What are you saying that for, you stupid idiot? Nah, I knew you'd get it wrong. God, you always get these things wrong. God, you are useless. When they try and do another business, all the failings that crashed the first one are simply going to be evidence to prove that everything they were told about them being useless is absolutely right. So, of course, they're not going to succeed. Whereas the other one, they do something wrong as a child. Oh, well, that didn't work. Oh, these things happen. What went wrong? How could you do it differently next time? You can do it. Just get back on your bike. Get back on your bike. Doesn't matter how many times you fall off that bike. Get back on the bike. You will get there.
What an interesting...
Oh, your exam result wasn't that good. Oh, what areas do you need to revise a little bit more for next time? Is there anything I can do to help you? How can we get you through it next time? They've had the support.
really good distinction.
Exactly. So that's where the mindset comes in. They have two very different mindsets.
I want to play that out just a little bit more and unpack that, because what we're exploring right now is that and I'm going to use the word bracket, limiting, close bracket, our limiting beliefs, received, stored from early childhood when we were in a hypnotic state, also known as theta waves. When we experience that, we've stored it into our unconscious, and we cannot do anything but create a reality, an existence that collects evidence to prove that our limiting belief is in fact correct. I am useless. I never could do it. I always fail, or whatever the language or the narrative is. But the other person equally true. So their belief system, and it's a limiting belief as well, in my opinion, is also creating a reality that is giving them evidence to prove that they're right. When they fall down, they just get back on their bike.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's all down to mindset. And in that case, the beliefs, one has the belief that, I always fail. I'm always going to get things wrong. The other has the belief that, hey, fall down 5 times, get up 6.
Interesting.
If I keep doing it, if I keep learning from my mistakes, I will succeed.
Okay,
2 different mindsets, different sets
of
of beliefs.
How does one...
And that's why we get the different results. Go on.
So where do we begin with the individual who's had the more negatively impacting 0 to 6 experience? Where do we begin?
And that's why I said earlier that there is no one size fits all. You've got to really understand where all of this comes from, because it's all about why are they afraid of being visible? Is it because they've been told, sit down, shut up?
Yeah.
Is it because they've been told you're rubbish and useless? Is it because they don't actually believe in what it is that they're offering? For example, 3 very different possibilities. Yeah. And there's what, 7.5 billion people on the planet, so there's 7.5 billion possibilities. Everyone is different. So it's figuring out what's causing this fear of being seen. What is it about being seen that gives you that fear? Where is that fear coming from? Is it a belief? Is it an attitude? What is it? Where is it coming from? Then identifying where these things come from. Once you've identified that, then you can actually go in and change the meaning that we apply to these things and relearn the lessons. Because here's the wonderful thing. 2 wonderful things. One, none of us are born that way. Nobody is born afraid of anything. As any parents of very, very young kids will attest. Yeah, they are not scared of anything. They will happily climb up onto the top of the tallest piece of furniture and launch themselves off if you don't stop them. So we've got to instill a sense of respect for the realities of life.
Yeah.
So we've got to kind of teach them, no, don't stick your hand in the fire. That will hurt. Now, it's a very, very tricky thing instilling all of this respect for the world, especially when as a parent you're terrified for what could happen to your child.
Yeah.
Which means very often, rather than teach them in a dispassionate, helpful way, we often instill a lot of our own fear. A very great example is 4 words which I bet every single listener has heard when they were growing up, probably many, many times. Those words are this: don't talk to strangers. We've all heard that, and when we're growing up, it is invaluable advice. There is no 2 ways about it. That has saved countless numbers of lives. However, a couple of things about that. One, it's never said as, oh, by the way, don't talk to strangers. Right, now what are we going to have for tea? It's never done that. It usually comes with so much emotion and fear behind it that it kind of comes across more as, don't you ever go and talk to strangers, because if you talk to strangers, they will kill you to death, and Mummy and Daddy will be very upset, and it'll all be your fault because you spoke to strangers. Of course I'm going to be terrified of the thought of speaking to strangers. And at no point, I'm willing to bet that at no point as we grew up did anyone say to us, you know what, Shannon, you're old enough and wise enough and clever enough to be able to look after yourself. Shannon, it's okay to talk to strangers. We're never told that. Yeah. So is it any wonder so many people grow up scared of speaking with strangers? And that's just one single example. So we're not born scared of anything. We have these fears instilled in us. We're taught them, or we learn them from experiences or whatever. So we learn all of these things. And the other thing is, whenever something happens, it doesn't mean anything. Things happen. They don't have any meaning. The only meaning they have is the meaning which we give to them. We decide this means this. I'm riding along, I fall off my bike. I decide that means bikes are dangerous and I should never get on a bike. Or I ride along, I fall off my bike. I decide that means I need to learn how to balance better.
Yeah.
But what all it actually meant was you weren't balancing, you fell off and it hurt. But we apply different meanings. There's a very, very powerful example. It's during the Second World War, there were two brothers were captured and held in concentration camps, both in the same circumstances, same situations. One of them died, the other one didn't. The one who died basically had the mindset that, oh my God, this is awful. That's it. Life's over. There's nothing to live for. This is going to kill me. The other one had the mindset, oh my God, this is awful. The world needs to hear about this. I've got to do whatever it takes to survive this so that I can tell the world about what's happening here. Of course, they each got the result that they expected from their mindset. Yeah. Did it mean either of those things? No, but they each applied their meanings and their life
unfolded accordingly.
Unfolded accordingly. So when something happens, we do something wrong and people laugh at us and tell us to shut up when we're a kid. We kind of take the meaning that means we shouldn't speak out. It means we shouldn't try these things. It doesn't mean that at all. That's just the meaning that we had at the time. Now, our unconscious is doing the best it can with what it has to protect us.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It may have decided that was really, really unpleasant, so we're never going to do that again because that hurts. So,
sorry to interject for a second.
That's all right.
Causing this idea that fear is a byproduct of, and I'm using a business context for this, not necessarily the physical, but fear is a byproduct, maybe even a feedback loop for individuals who are leaving one's comfort zone. So leaving one's comfort zone can't help but do anything except trigger fear. And in the moment of triggering fear, there is an invitation being made to your conscious self to go and explore the unconscious to see what bracket, limiting close bracket belief is rooted in there that now wants to be seen, maybe healed, maybe reintegrated, and as you're saying now, have a new meaning or a more complete and holistic and helpful meaning attached to it. Because
that's a great insight, yeah.
As long as it remains within your unconscious self, it is oblivious to you and runs your life and creates a reality that produces evidence to reinforce that your bracket, limiting close bracket, your limiting belief is true. And it's clearly true for you in that moment because of the meaning you attach to that limiting belief that sits in your unconscious at whatever young, precious age you were. And that now needs to be brought into, that's interesting. So it now needs to be brought into the awareness, which for many of us, and myself included, although not recently, but years ago, for many of us, I'll talk about myself. When there was an invitation given to me back in 2014 to go into my unconscious self and pull out a deep-rooted limiting belief, and put it on the table for another person to see, not just me, there was a moment of fear, not a moment, it lasted a year, but let's call it a moment of fear that went something like, I can't go back. If I open that box, the pain in there is so vast and so acute that I'll actually die. And then there was this cerebral part of me that said, it's not helpful. You can't go forward looking in your rearview mirror, when of course you can. Of course, I'm testament to it. I do it. But I would imagine for many of us, when we trigger this fear by leaving our comfort zone, and then someone like yourself says, hey, let's go back to that moment when, that the person is like, wow, I'm not sure I'm ready to do that. Because that can be terrifying as well. Yet it's an illusion, isn't it? Is fear an illusion, Keith?
I would say fear itself is kind of like it's a warning. Now, so many of us treat fear as an absolute truth, for want of a better word. Whereas think of fear as simply a warning. It's basically saying, hey, hold on, let's take a look at this. And so for some people, it's kind of like that light comes on that says, oh, there's something to look at here. So many of us go, all right, back off, we'll retreat. Whereas in fact, it's kind of a warning, and you can pause, right, okay, what is that light telling me? What is it? What are the things of which I need to be aware? Have I checked everything? Does everything fit? I can proceed accordingly. So it's not, so fear isn't a big giant stop sign. Fear is kind of like that if you're in a meeting and one person goes, have we looked at X, Y, and Z? And that's the point that you don't go, right, we'll cancel the project. You just go, oh, that's a good point. We'll check X, Y, and Z. Yep. Yes, it's all good. Brilliant. Let's move. So use it as a flag that it's just, oh, is there something we need to check here, rather than let's never move forward.
I think fear is, it has to be many things, because we know that it creates a visceral response in us.
Absolutely, yes.
In the business context, there is some illusion that's in there. Mm-hmm. It is a feedback loop, of course, or a bit of feedback. Mm-hmm. It is an invitation to go in. I love that. It is an invitation to go in and to clean up, clear, heal, integrate the parts of you that are holding you back. And I think in the business world in particular, we tend to have visions for ourselves and our business. We tend to, like the analogy you gave of the two lads in the concentration camp, the one brother that survived had a vision that was bigger than him. And I meet business owners who have visions that are bigger than them and are up to creating something that is bigger than them. And 3 years and 5 years and 10 years, for some of them, it's a legacy business. There is quite a vast vision that they're holding. And the person that they are today needs to grow into the version of themselves that gets to realize or make real that 3 year and 5 year vision. And I'm going to put something out there. Fear is the stepping stones inviting you to cross the river to become the version of you that gets to have the successful business, that gets to be in service to thousands or tens of thousands. And so resisting fear, avoiding fear, or shrinking away from fear, well, totally makes sense and definitely has its place at times. Also warrants, invites, demands, requires, I don't know what word to use, you to embrace it and turn into it and maybe even snog it for a little bit so that you get to continue the steps across the river to become that version of yourself. So in that case, fear is a tool or a sword with which you get to sharpen, a stone with which you get to sharpen your sword / vision. Did that make sense, what I just said?
It does, yes. And
I'm
that
talking
is
out
a
loud and
lovely
I'm
way of looking
trying
at
to
it.
get to the point. I'm thinking, what am I trying to say here? Fear is your friend. It is inviting you to discover more parts of yourself that you need to fall in love with to continue this mission that you're on. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a lovely way of looking at it.
So if we go back to the quote that you brilliantly brought in here, I love it. The visibility paradox. Isn't it just such a paradox? I am tired of being seen, but my heart will not allow me to stay hidden. That's an interesting conflict. And so, sorry, can you call the quote out to me one more time?
Yes, the only thing in the world worse than being seen is not being seen.
Bless you, Oscar Wilde. The only thing in the world worse than being seen is not being seen. And I'd imagine for me, at the intersection of those two states is an individual who needs to become aware, who wants to become aware of mindset and the unconscious and the conscious. And you talked about, hearing something over and over and over and over again, like the GPS map on my phone. And then the moment that shows up in her perspective, in her reality, she can't help but respond in a way that proves herself to be true, because the shriek my mom gave put the fear of God in me. We would have had an accident just because of a reaction, not because I'm glancing at the GPS map. Final thoughts, final insights?
Ooh, now that's always a good one, isn't it? Final thoughts, insights. That could take hours in and of themselves. I think the final thought that I would like to leave people with is just that fear isn't a massive stop sign. It's simply treat fear as simply have we looked at everything? Is there something I've missed here? So treat it as a point to stop, double check everything, and make sure it's okay to move on. And in some cases, that might simply be that you just need to double check you've got everything in place. In other cases, it might be, as you suggested, an invitation to consider previous experiences which need to be recontextualized, to be reframed, and to relearn from past events using the knowledge that we have now. They say that people often dismiss things. Oh yeah, hindsight is 20/20, and yes, we can't change what happened in the past, but we can change the meanings we apply to what happened in the past, and we can change the lessons we can now learn from what happened in the past. So we can't change the past, but we can change the impact it has on our present, which absolutely enables us to change our future.
And I want to say again, what came up in our conversation is recontextualizing the past reframes that belief. And so if you're operating in a reality that can only give you evidence to prove that belief you hold is true, then recontextualizing that belief is critical. The other thing that I want to just acknowledge is I find it almost impossible for an individual to self-analyze in the way that they can get to the root in their unconscious self, to do the work to recontextualize it and have it show up differently, that it is in facilitating or some form of facilitation or conversation that they get a much better view of themselves.
Absolutely, yes.
And trying to figure this out alone. And I mention that because I'm aware of quite a number of business owners who are struggling in this area, particularly in the financial services industry, where they're thinking of changing careers or have left a big corporate C-suite role and are now starting up on their own and struggling with themselves as to why they haven't figured it out yet. They're physicists and mathematicians, and they should be really smart. Of course they are. And yet, because piece it out.
Yeah, because we often find it so hard to figure that out, simply because we are right in it. As the saying goes, you can't see the wood for the trees. Whereas if you can get a third-party perspective, someone who can see it from the outside, not encumbered by all of the previous lessons, they can help us to see. Now, it doesn't mean that they're coming in and fixing things for us. What it does mean is they're helping us to see what's already there so that we can recognize what we can do. And it's a very important thing. You mentioned that if we believe we can't do something, we'll see all the evidence to prove that. Here's the very interesting thing. If you look for evidence to support any belief, you'll find that evidence. So if you believe if you believe that you always mess things up, you can look back and see lots of times when you mess things up. If, however, you were to decide, you know what, I'm just going to look for evidence that I succeed, you'll find plenty of evidence for things where you succeed as well. Because we all mess things up. We all succeed in things. Whatever you look for, you will find evidence to prove that position. So if you're going to be looking for evidence, look for evidence of good, positive things.
The visibility paradox is on your website. Is that right?
I have a blog about the visibility paradox. Yes.
Beautiful. I'm going to add a link into the podcast description as it goes out. Love the visibility paradox. Love that so much. It's so perfectly resonant with the business world that I operate in. Keith, thank you so much for joining me. I would love to have you back, and I'm asking you live if you'd be coming back. I think we can.
Fear! I would absolutely love to come back sometime, Shannon. I've had a wonderful discussion. I hope that listeners have got a lot out of this. And I would love to come back anytime.
Yeah, it's an important topic. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us on the Work That Matters podcast, conversations at the intersection of personal and business growth. The Work That Matters podcast, it's brought to you by ShannonEastman.com.